Always enjoy doing this with you. And Glenn Saunders, COO at Nuage. And yeah, looking forward to learning a little bit. I'm a recovered accountant. I have a degree. So, some of the sales stack stuff is way beyond me, but looking forward to learning quite a bit today. So.
Well, that's why we've got the expert here today. Shane, we're super excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. For folks who are not aware, Shane is a host of Tariff Tuesdays. Shane is Director of Cross-Border Sales over at Avalara, who's going to be walking us through the craziness of tariffs. So I don't know how you keep your head on straight with everything that is changing seemingly by the hour these days. But Shane, could you introduce yourself and maybe we can dive into.
Hey, absolutely. And first off, thank you guys for being partners of Avalara. First and foremost, our organization is built on partners like you, so we truly appreciate it. And then reaching out, first off, also joining Trade and Tariff Tuesdays, and then inviting me to join this. But yes, my name is Shane Bogden. I'm our Director of Cross-Border Sales at Avalara. Just a little bit of background on Avalara. Our goal is based on simplifying tax compliance and making taxing more relaxing, as our tagline here. From where I sit on our cross-border side, more cross-border compliance. So think about the hot topics currently right now, things along the lines of calculating duty and tax rates, HTS classifications that may, some of you may not know what those are. We can even cover those today. And also trade content management as well. Are there restrictions on goods, certain goods going into other countries, et cetera? We work with a variety of organizations from marketplaces, shipping and logistic partners, warehouses, trade compliant platforms, where we're helping power them behind the scenes in terms of everything I mentioned around the duty and tax calculation, HS classifications, and trade content management. So yes, thank you guys for inviting me.
Well, we're excited. I guess everybody has a little bit of a quiet weekend before all hell breaks loose on April 2nd. Can you tell us about what's coming with Liberation Day and everything?
Yeah, well, hey, I wish I had a crystal ball. It's funny, we've been getting these questions all along the lines for several weeks now, and I think if for those of you that are aware of our Trade and Tariff Tuesdays, feel free to join. We have recordings out there which we can share. But I guess it would be good just to kind of give you, Louis, of like what's really been happening. We've gone through the timeline numerous every Tuesday, and it continues to expand and expand and expand. It's like this accordion right now. But really, a lot of this stuff started on February 1st, which was basically when the White House and Trump basically said they were going to enact 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and then also 10% plus on China. These were supposed to go into effect on February 4th. February 4th was a wild day because then you saw Canada impose retaliatory tariffs back. This was actually February 3rd, provide retaliatory tariffs back, and then basically came to agreement that those tariffs would then be pushed to March 4th. Over the time period of that kind of delay, we continued to impose additional tariffs on China. There were additional announcements being made across the board that on March 12th, there would be 25% aluminum tariffs on aluminum and steel, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware. There had been talks about 25% tariffs on automotives, which we know were just announced 36 hours ago, that are going to go into play on April 2nd. Anyways, fast forward then to March 4th. Those 25% tariffs go back into play for Canada and Mexico, with the caveat being that anything that's under USMCA agreement would not trigger that 25%. And I like to put this a little bit into perspective too, because we're talking about goods being imported from Canada, goods being imported from Mexico. And the perspective putting into play here, only 30% of goods coming into the US from Canada are USMCA eligible. That 70% is not eligible for USMCA. And a big part of that are things that are not country of origin. What considers things USMCA eligible is if there's transportation in country of origin had taken place in that country. So if a good in Canada was substantially transformed there and it has a label of country of origin of Canada, that would not get hit with the 25% tariff. It would fall under USMCA. Same thing with Mexico. Mexico, 50% of goods being imported in the US fall under USMCA. But the clear delineation here is if you're going to hit with these tariffs at the current moment from Canada or Mexico, if country of origin is within Mexico, Canada, or the US. That's the main qualifier really on that front. So, that goes into place. Then over the past, week or so, additional things are coming out that the automotive tariffs are back on the table. Canada adds additional reciprocal tariffs. So although we have, tariffs in play for non-USMCA goods coming to the US from Canada, Canada actually has $60 billion, 25% tariff rate on US goods coming into Canada, and that equates to about $60 billion. So we now have this quasi-trade war happening with Canada, and you may have seen some things in relation to one thing over the past 24 hours was I think Ottawa is now putting up banners in major metro areas within the United States. I don't know if you guys have seen these billboards. It basically says tariff are tax on your groceries. So they are now Canadians are actually now putting up billboards in the States basically saying that tariffs are bad. And it's really going to be, it's the impact on the end consumer and your wallet. So the April 2nd date, Liberation Day, that it's now being coined and everything. This is, something that started being alluded to at the end of February. It was then catching more steam throughout early March. I know a lot of, business channels have been asking the secretary of what does this actually mean? What are the details around this? It has been very sparse in terms of what details are actually going to come out on this piece. There was, things people were alluding to that it being specific to industry verticals and segments that were going to get hit, pharma, manufacturing, bev elk, et cetera. Now nobody really knows. There's this term, the 30-15, which are top 15 trading partners with the highest duty rates or tariff rates that we're hearing that may come into play. But really, we don't know at the current moment. So I wish I had a crystal ball. Tuesday is when Wednesday, it's when it's going to be announced. On Thursday, we're actually going to hold a separate tariff and trade webinar that we do the following day after all of these announcements are made to try to unpack what we can. But it has become quite the hot topic. I've been in the cross-border industry the past 15 years, and I will tell you, this has been one keeping us on our toes across a lot of this stuff here. So, that's in a nutshell within 8 minutes here of what I got for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, and go ahead, Glenn.
I was just to say, how are you guys staying on top of it? I can imagine the amount of research and analysis that's going to. I mean, taxes are complicated as it is, and then layering this on. Are you all looking at variability and options and kind of what you're expecting with policymakers and those types of things?
Yeah, so it's our information is as good as the content that's being published by the governments. And I'll give us there's kind of two components here in terms of how we're staying on top of things. We have a variety of individuals. We're actually putting out weekly blog or daily blogs or hourly blogs when this new information comes out that we're trying to put out to the market for our clients, partners, et cetera. So they have these details on hand. At Valera, though, on our cross-border side, we have a large team of content researchers and engineers that are constantly looking at the federal registrar, which is basically the list of the U.S. agency where they basically list all the goods that are going to be impacted by specific tariffs, and they provide the HS classifications on those in order to update content and what's going to get hit with the tariffs. But we are basically on standby nonstop in terms of what's happening. And we've been incredibly agile in terms of what's been going on. So I gave the date of February 4th, which is when Canada and Mexico and China went into play. Our team was ready to basically adjust all of our calculation services, our duty quoting services with those updated tariffs as they went into play. And then over those 48 hours, we were basically monitoring everything because we're hearing that, these may be pulled back. Some of them may be pulled back. And on the 7th, they were able to quickly make that change. Fast forward again to March 4th, when we turned them back on. Now we're talking only a segment of those tariffs coming into play. If it's USMCA, we are able to turn those on and then adjust them by USMCA. So yeah, we have a whole team that their whole role is specifically around international cross-border content and maintaining that all of our calculation engines are up and running, and it's with the most accurate information that's physically out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a gargantuan lift. So,
and I guess in the same vein, curious. We kind of heard murmurs from Europe that they're going to be waiting, I think, till after the fact.
Yeah, that's another one of these. It's there's been the whiplash. I've been calling it kind of the light switch, because it's like we're turning tariffs on, we're turning them off, we're turning them on, we're turning them off. But yeah, Europe, they came out with the potential reciprocals on goods to the U.S. The U.S. shot back in terms of a 200% tariff on things like champagne, wine, etc. All those pieces. I know the EU did just basically, I think it was last week, they put that on pause of any sort of reciprocal tariffs on the US until everybody finds out what's going to happen on April 2nd. And basically what the media has also been saying is that there's been a lot of negotiations happening behind the scenes, I think, with some of these countries. They may not be as high as, some of these rates of 200, 25%, et cetera, but we really don't know until we know. So it'll be definitely an interesting day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think wine and champagne is a great example. And I think something we've been hearing a lot is just the kind of the knock-on impacts of what's happening, and I think on Tuesday, you all shared a little bit about just the insight of what's happening on, in the liquor stores in Canada. Can you share a little bit of just outside of tariff?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a wild piece, because, I think this was about 3 weeks ago, March 4th, when this first phase, and I'm just looking at my dates here, that's when the first phase of Canada's reciprocal tariffs came into play on US. So again, US goods entering and being imported into Canada. So Canada commenced reciprocals right away, $30 billion worth of goods, and included on that was, alcoholic beverages, whiskeys, beer, etc. Well, a couple days late, 48 hours later, you have the CEO of Brown-Forman of, Jack Daniels on there, and he's basically saying, we understand that there's tariffs on there. It's keeping the price up of the goods of our whiskey. But what's worse is now Canadians are actually pulling these U.S. goods off the shelves, creating a sense of nationalism. And again, kind of a larger full play of these reciprocals of, rather than, hey, yeah, okay, the price is going to be 25% higher. What's worse than that? They can't even sell it because people are pulling them off the shelves. Right. And those are province-run facilities. So like the LCBO, Liquor Control Board of Ontario, where Toronto sits, and one of the major provinces there, they basically have full control of the liquor stores up there and what's being provided on the shelves. And there's a ton of pictures out there currently right now where a lot of liquor shelves are empty, and there's basically a sheet of paper that says "Buy Canadian," and then it's got Canadian whiskey next to it or something else. So that's a big piece there in terms of that. And then you have the aluminum piece. We were talking about the aluminum component too. I mean, that's going to be impactful in terms of, a lot of brewers within the U.S. I mean, I think, what was it said? I think 40% of U.S. receives 40% of the aluminum from Canada, imports it from Canada. And I know a lot of the brewers, I live in upstate New York, and there's a ton of breweries around. I know it's been a hot, piece for the past 10 years. A lot of them are starting to sweat in terms of, hey, well, what is this going to do to aluminum pricing moving forward? So it's the actual good of the food, things like that. And then you also talk about the components of the packaging of that, which really, this is where it's kind of this domino effect of, like, you have the actual good itself, then you have the packaging and all the other components of this, where it starts to layer on. So yeah, that's a little bit of, kind of something we were talking about the other day in relation to that. And just the other piece, imports coming in from Canada, if those goods, like orange juice, peanut butter, wine, coffee, etc., we're not country of origin of within Canada, US, or Mexico, those coming into the US are going to get slapped with another 25%. So those are also facing, non-USMCA tariffs coming in from Canada, Mexico as well.
Shane, I see Sarah in the the questions asked this, as it relates to the HSA codes. How in the world do you find that? How can you tell if you're USMCA approved or not approved?
Yeah, well, a lot of it, it's funny, and unfortunately, we get this question a lot, and we can't really give advice because this should actually really go to a broker or a trade attorney on these pieces. What it's going to ultimately roll down to some capacity, is that this whole country of origin. Where is substantial, quote unquote, substantial transformation taken place on that good? Where was it? Majority of it being crafted, manufactured, et cetera, to get that country of origin. It doesn't matter if it is shipping from a country into the U.S., but if it is a country of origin of China or outside of Canada, U.S., and Mexico, it is going to be hit with those pieces. So, we've been asked, one question on this of how should we prepare for these things moving forward? A couple things here is stay calm. I mean, I think everybody's in the same boat here, and we're going to see what happens. But product descriptions are going to be key moving forward. Imports coming into the U.S. The U.S. has been, I don't want to say lenient, but it hasn't been as restrictive in terms of looking at these goods coming to the U.S., especially goods that are under that $800 de minimis. And for those of you who do not know, de minimis is the threshold at which an import coming into the U.S. is then with a duty, a tax. U.S. has a very high threshold in terms of a duty rate on the import. So goods under $800 are under de minimis. They do not get hit with duties. Because of this inflow, we haven't really been capturing a lot of this information. So this is a key part of that. Also, the whole fentanyl piece that you've all been hearing about as well too. This is where a lot of this whole trade and tariff catalyst started, was about safety and the fentanyl of goods coming in from China and other nations that are coming in. It doesn't have the correct information on the parcels. It's not getting a duty rate affiliated with it. And it's basically just entering the U.S. There's a lot of bipartisan regulations currently out there with the House, basically saying, well, we need to figure out ways to add additional information on those parcels coming in so they're appropriately reviewed. Now, the thing is, I give this stat weekly. It was 125 million de minimis parcels entering the U.S. in 2015. 125 million. You guys know what it was last year in 2024?
I do, because I watched the episode. It starts with a B.
Any guess, Clint?
I'll go $1 billion.
1.34 billion. And it was $1 billion before the year before.
So essentially working around the system because of the de minimis tax to bring in illegal or illicit goods, or just stay under the radar so you don't get hit with any type of taxation or duties from the federal government, tax avoidance. Yeah,
and you saw a lot of this also start too during COVID. Obviously, you started to see the spike of international goods coming through. A lot of the Chinese marketplaces that have grown substantially, they're representing a majority of that volume. But the piece was on the fentanyl piece and safety of, well, these parcels are coming in. They don't have, a majority of them don't have a full HS10 classification code, which determines the eligibility of that good coming in, potentially the duty rate, et cetera. Product descriptions are inaccurate on there. So long-winded response, going back to the piece of advisement that we are saying is product descriptions are going to be key for goods coming into the U.S. of what is that good, what is in that parcel, what is the country of origin, because ultimately that is going to dictate what the duty rate is on that good. HS classification code, that is the other key piece here that is going to be required. And in order to get that, you need to know all the product descriptions, the country of origin, et cetera. So those are some key pieces, that we're kind of advising others to think about.
Shane, I guess going back to just country of origin versus point of origin, can you describe? Can you break that down, simplify it for us?
Yeah. So country of origin again is where a good is actually physically, mainly physically manufactured, or where quote unquote substantial transformation comes into play here. Point of shipment is where a good is shipped from. So back in December, I think like December 23rd or so, Mexico and even the U.S. started cracking down on this and adding additional duties, because what was happening is, some retailers were importing goods from other nations, and they would import them into Mexico. And then they would go Mexico and up, a more favorable duty rate coming into Mexico, and then it would fall under de minimis coming into the U.S. Obviously, cheaper, more affordable labor, more affordable warehousing cost, etc. So on that point, that's really kind of a loophole here, because those goods that they could be housing in Mexico for fulfillment, those may have country of origin in China. And again, what is being affixed to what that tariff rate and duty rate is going to be based upon where is the country of origin. That is ultimately going to dictate, where is that good substantially transformed into what it's currently at now to get those rates, to get those, apply for the duty rates, et cetera, tariffs.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I guess if you all are polling your audiences week after week, any specific trends you're starting to see? Is everybody kind of in a wait and see pattern, or?
No, so it's funny. We were asking this question, weekly over the past 6 weeks or so. And basically, it started out with are you planning to adjust your supply chain due to impending global trade changes? And we offered four or five options. One is, I don't know. Second one is rethinking distribution. Third one is investing in a new trade technology. Fourth, switching to local suppliers. Fifth, diversifying supply chains outside of China. And at first, it really started to be like, I don't know, just because this is completely new to individuals. Nothing was really sticking. When you are saying that you're going to charge 25%, and then within 48 hours, that gets pulled away. Well, now you're just kind of in a wait and see kind of moment, which I feel like a majority of the industry is currently in right now until this April 2nd timeframe. But now we're seeing that I don't know, which has been the main contributor. Close to 50% of respondents have been saying, I don't know. We're now seeing that fall below 40%. We're seeing increases in switching to local suppliers. We're seeing increases in terms of rethinking distribution and investing in new trade technology. So I'm glad people are getting out of the mindset of I don't know, and now starting to think about, okay, well, we got to start rethinking about the distribution, or what are some of these other moves we're seeing. But yeah, went from a clear I don't know yet, and now 6 weeks in, it's like people are now starting to kind of think about what's going to happen. But again, a lot of this is just based upon the fact that there are so many changes happening every 48 hours that they're kind of waiting to see what actually sticks longer than that.
Yeah. And, I guess with those 48-hour, 72-hour spikes and changes, the drawback, duty drawback. I screw up and I ship something in that 3-day window. Can I get my money back?
No, you can't. I mean, this has been all of these press releases and executive orders are all basically stating there's no duty drawback and during that time frame. So yeah, it's pretty unfortunate on those pieces. If you were in that 48-hour plus window, and then it got revoked, yeah, no duty drawback on those pieces. Yeah.
Do you think it's likely that the government will retroactively do something once this is settled down on tax filings or something to that effect? Or do you think it's really going to stick that it is what it is, and companies are stuck with that depending on which day they chose to ship product?
Yeah, I'm going to say the latter there is I don't
Gotcha.
foresee doing any retroactive on there. And I think people should assume that wouldn't be happening. But you never know. I would say assume the latter.
And with your crystal ball here, this is your opinion, your opinion only. I dare say that Liberation Day may be a little bit of a nothing burger, and then peaks and valleys of 200% retaliatory, and then everybody comes to back to where it was. Safe to assume we're gonna be all over the place, and there's really no consistency here, or do we actually ever act together for?
Yeah, so it's funny. So my crystal ball on the tariffs and Liberation Day are murky. I don't know because nobody really knows. I think there are going to be things that stick. I mean, this has been made such a big deal about for the past 2 months that I feel as though if it's a nothing burger, that would seem odd that there was this much hype around it. We shall see. I hope it's pretty mild. What I think more than anything is going to happen, whether it be within the next 3 months or next 6 months, et cetera, is what I was talking about from the bipartisan kind of component there of the requirements for data on these goods entering in the U.S. And I can also see this also happening with other nations as well, either reducing the de minimis on top of, they may reduce it, but most likely a lot of this is going to come down to requiring additional information on these goods coming in the U.S. More product descriptions, appropriate appropriate country of origin, full HS classification codes on those goods. We're seeing a lot of manufacturers and clients come to us and say, hey, here's our catalog of goods. We want to make sure that everything is verified and that these goods have the appropriate HS code currently right now in preparation for anything. So we're seeing more than anything, people kind of being proactive and making sure that their catalog of goods, if they're exporting them from somewhere or coming into the US or vice versa, they're making sure all of those goods are properly classified just for anything to come down.
Mm-hmm. And you think we're going to see it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see a spike in then, I won't say seizures, but auditing as we roll out this reduction in de minimis plus, potentially reduction in de minimis as well as increased HST codes, harmonized codes, and then product descriptions, more audits going on where they're checking on these things as we increase the standards to try to capture illegal goods or tax avoidance or fentanyl, whatever it may be.
I think that's the goal, but kind of, everything out there right now has been on, part of this whole raising the $800 pieces is just the efficiency of that these goods could come in. It's going to take, this is a pretty contentious piece of, there was a new bill out there changing Type 86, which deals with, I won't go into nuances, but it deals with the goods under $800 coming to the US. There's a lot of affiliations that are currently out there that are basically saying, if we're going to be making changes like this, we need at least a year leeway in terms of being able to make sure our systems are up and ready. What about, CBP? Are they even ready to be able to handle these things?
Yeah. I mean, how in the world are they going to handle that?
Yeah. The cost of additional people, it had been proposed, I think a few months ago that, every parcel coming in, maybe under de minimis gets additional $2 processing fee that goes to the government or CBP or something to cover those costs. That's the piece here of, if you're going to add additional requirements on these goods, again, I truly believe we are moving in that direction. But how to enforce that and how to review that, that's the other big question mark out there of how these systems. And just on that point, on February 25th, they actually removed de minimis from Canada, Mexico, and China. It wasn't until I believe it was February 7th or 8th where they had to turn de minimis back on. And the president even came out and said, until we have adequate systems in place, we're putting de minimis back and reinstating it. USPS couldn't keep up with really understanding what they should actually be doing and making sure that they're actually properly processing those packages. And some, I believe, even stopped processing them as they came in. But clearly, that is going to be a key piece here. The president even stated that until we get adequate systems in place, we're turning de minimis back on. But again, that's kind of foreshadowing of we've turned it off previously. They're going to be working on something. And again, this is also a bipartisan piece to understand how to process those parcels coming in under that $800. Yeah.
Well, and in my lowly brain, there's a certain threshold at which point it becomes there's no benefit to checking those de minimis packages. So as you alluded to, I think getting into a surcharge or a fee going into, which ultimately will be passed to the consumer, but how to manage that in an effective way of I don't know, whether it's technologically, scanning packages and but obviously there's a lot of catch up from a technology perspective and people perspective. It's going to have to
Yeah,
happen.
it's not a strength of our federal government. Technology is
Yeah.
got a long way to go. I guess, Shane, in the vein of, as Glenn alluded to with just the notion of audits, what are the risks of non-compliance?
Non-compliance. Yeah, I mean, obviously penalties are the number one things. And then you got to think about it from a consumer perspective of if you're ordering something internationally, it gets stuck. Now you've just burned that relationship with that customer as well. If that gets stuck in another country, if it gets stuck in the US, it can't actually be delivered. Now, if you're an international shipper, you have now something stuck internationally, you're going to get fined for it. Now you have to figure out how to get that back to your country if you can't push it forward within the destination of delivery. You've just burned bridges with that consumer. So there's a lot that can go wrong on there. And again, the penalties and fines, they've been issuing a lot of these things, even for China, that inbound parcels that are starting to come in from China, they need to make sure that they are appropriately line item with what is receiving the 20%, 10% tariff rate, 20% tariff rate, et cetera, or else they're going to be held up and then rejected. So there's a lot that comes into play here in terms of, what are the challenges that really can happen with those goods coming in. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then I guess, it's kind of one of those things where you're like, did I dream that, or did that actually happen earlier this week? With all the changes that are happening, I know Trump, maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, announced something to the effect of with the automotive side, with cross country, and then said it was void. I think it was something he had passed in his first term with the agreement. Any idea where that's?
I don't know. I mean, it's from what it sounds like, it's going to be 25% on automotive goods and parts that are not manufactured within the U.S. So that's going to be that's supposed to come into play on April 2nd. And I know that's all this within the past 36 hours, but that is going to be very interesting just because of the fact that a lot of components of automotive parts are manufactured all over the world. The automotives, even Ford that manufactures in the U.S., a lot of the components come from the Canada region, the Greater Toronto area up there. Other parts from Mexico. Wall Street Journal did a very interesting article a couple of weeks ago, basically illustrating a supply chain flow for some of these automotive companies, and it's crazy because it starts in the U.S. and then it goes to Canada, then it goes to Mexico, then it goes back to U.S. for refinement, then it goes back to Canada. So it's these multi cross-border pieces that go into the full manufacturing life cycle.
In that scenario, is it safe to assume there's a 25% on top of the 25%?
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of people are arguing on the duty drawback piece of like, well, why are we? It's now being a stackable tariff on those pieces of goods that are hopping borders. So yeah, it goes back to that whole duty drawback piece you mentioned previously. Yeah.
Wow.
What are you seeing customers do? I know we talked about the survey that you had done, but are there any strategies you're starting to see customers employ? Are you seeing customers start to stockpile inventory? I know, with COVID, I know a lot of our customers were whatever they could get their hands on, they bought as much as they could, particularly stuff coming from China, like containers, and they would just buy a shipload, whatever they could get in stock and just deal with the warehouse space issue over the tariff and complications.
Yeah, I mean, how about that that cyclical approach? Because yes, there was a lot of retail started basically bringing a lot of this stuff into their warehouses, inventory overload, et cetera. Then after 2020 and 2021, it was this whole age of how do we basically reduce all of the goods that we have in our fulfillment facilities and get lean on that front and be more agile when it comes to demand rather than just stock load these things and liquidate it. Now it's funny. Now it's like everybody's getting worried about, if I don't bring it in now, is it going to be more expensive if I do it at a later time? So, this is definitely something that's a trend that's happening right now. And I think there's a few reports that have come out, even manufacturing one that came out the other day, is that yeah, they're starting to see, at least on the retail side, increase of imports coming to the U.S. to help stockpile these things to risk mitigate against any additional costs that are going to be potentially applied to those goods coming in. I mean, again, from a more general stance of other things that we're seeing is the main trend that we're seeing is a lot of clients, partners having questions about how do we prepare for something like this in terms of making sure our catalog is updated. What are the descriptions? What are the proper HS classification codes that we need on these things? Are these codes still even good, et cetera? Because they want to have this information readily available, because it's ultimately going to dictate the duty rate, but also going to be, necessary for goods being imported to the U.S. from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah. Well,
A lot.
Man,
Yeah.
Need a beer after all of this.
Yeah.
This is not something we thought we'd be having a podcast on a few.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We've been live a few months ago, but it's kept it interesting for sure. I have a customer who has government, or a friend who has government contracts and razor thin margins, so it actually is supplying people in the government, but he's trying to navigate this because a lot of his and medical supplies comes from overseas, and just those contracts don't typically have any type of cost markup for changes in environmental factors, so it's creating a lot of undue pressure in different areas of the business for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to start seeing, at least in the retail space, companies should start getting proactive in terms of their pricing strategy, because obviously pricing and tagging of these goods happens before it gets into the States for those that are non-manufacturing it. So it's always easier to bring the price down versus increasing the price. So if you are manufacturing something internationally, most likely I would say, you should probably think about increasing the prices on the goods if you are bringing those in, because you can always discount them on the label, but increasing them once they get over here and retagging them, et cetera, you got to probably start thinking about that right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shane, this has been super insightful. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. To the audience, Shane's got as he noted, and as I noted, a pretty awesome webinar on Tuesdays. We'll make sure we share that link with everybody, and it should be hopefully you don't have to work through the weekend in preparation for next week. But
yeah, no, I think it'll all come down to the second, and then figuring out what all of this stuff means. And I think the whole world is going to be in the same boat too. So I never would have imagined this space, being on the front page every single day. So, keeps us busy though.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Shane, any kind of last words on Avalara and how you can help individuals?
Hey, I mean, I think the first thing is, businesses shouldn't be panicking on these things. There's organizations out there to help as much as possible. Avalara can do that, again, on the classification of goods. We have a team of 250 individuals that actually help do all these classifications. We have our own tools that are self-serve tools, automated tools. And then on the duty calculations, as I was mentioning before, is that we are changing these, and these are up to speed as much as humanly possible. So we have all this the ability to help out. Even if you just want to chat with us and connect, we're more than happy to do it. I'll do a shameless plug for our Tuesday tariff trade webinars that we're giving a full each week. We're giving a full diagram of the timeline. We're going to have to start shortening that up, though. There's too many events that have been occurring. Blogs, really, we have an amazing individual. I'll do a shout out to Gail Cole, who's putting this stuff in and publishing it on the hourly when things come out. We just published a new one today, specifically on wine and spirits, alcohol and spirits, et cetera, and what that means currently right now. So we have tons of blogs keeping the industry up to date in terms of what's happening. So, yep, we're here to help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Shane, thank you again. To our audience, we appreciate you spending a couple minutes with us, and hope everybody has a good weekend.
Thanks, gentlemen.
See ya.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.